welcome back to my channel. My name is Jaime Leigh and I'm a mixed media artist. Today's video will be an art video. We will be using a Lightbox, and I have a couple other videos where I have done Lightbox drawings and I can link them below. I'll put one up here so that you can go check it out. The reason why I have started doing a couple more of these types of videos is because my original Lightbox video has like 8,000 views now. So obviously people are interested in watching Lightbox videos, and the last 3 that I did were doing a drawing from a photograph on the Lightbox. So for today's video, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. Today we're going to be doing a drawing video on the Lightbox, helping you go over some drawing skills and how you can use the Lightbox, especially drawing things that you're not that confident in drawing. And what's funny about drawing that you may not know until you're actually drawing and learning how to draw is that your brain is trying to fight you the whole way when you're trying to learn how to draw. Because when you draw, you have to draw what you see, not what your brain tells you you're seeing. So it can be very hard to draw accurately because you're fighting your brain the whole time. The Lightbox is a great way to practice drawing using photographs, especially when you're drawing like faces and that sort of thing, body parts, hands. The Lightbox and a photograph can help you draw more accurately because it gives you a way to practice drawing things that you may not feel confident about. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, I hope you'll continue to watch. If you like art videos on mixed media art, time-lapse painting videos, anything talking about mixed media art techniques and materials, I'd love it if you would subscribe to my channel. I also have a whole playlist of other videos that I do, what I call weird art videos. That's things like paranormal art, strange topics in art history, art and murder mysteries. So if any of that sounds cool to you, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, ring the bell to be notified when I upload a new video. And let's go ahead and get started with our Lightbox video today. If you hear snoring, as always, my Frenchie Stella is right behind me in the chair, and I have about this much room and she has about this much room. And that is just how it goes. So what you will need for today's video, obviously, a Lightbox. This is what a Lightbox is. If you haven't ever seen one before, this is my Lightbox. It's just a flat surface that you can set your photograph or your paper, your sketch paper on. And what you do is you plug it in. Mine plugs in. I'm sure other ones do, you know, maybe batteries or something, and then obviously the light inside is going to shine through your paper and your photograph, and it will help you trace. Now, when you trace something, you could use tracing paper. That is absolutely something that artists use to transfer drawings or that sort of thing from one surface to another. However, a lot of times when you use tracing paper, if there's dark areas, it's really hard to see through the tracing paper and you don't get as accurate of a drawing. So using a Lightbox with the light from underneath really helps you be very accurate because everything shows up much, much better. If you want to go ahead and follow along with today's video, what we're going to be tackling today specifically is hacks for drawing realistic looking eyes using a Lightbox. Now, I've been painting portraits for about 4 or 5 years now. When I started out, I really didn't have any clue what I was doing. I was very adamant that I needed to learn how to draw freehand and try to make it look right, even though I wasn't very good at it. And so a lot of my earlier drawings are very out of proportion, especially when I drew faces, because I didn't know how to make everything look accurate or realistic. What I'm talking about today with the Lightbox is that you can use a Lightbox to help you if you struggle with drawing certain things. Eyes are hard to draw because there's so much that you need to learn about eyes that goes against what your brain tells you about eyes. For example, people learn that eyes are pretty much almond shaped. That's the basic shape of an eye. They have a pupil, they have an iris, there's a lid above, people have eyelashes. These are all things we know. There's eyebrows above eyes. So in general, everybody's eye is similar, but also everybody's eye is completely different from every other person. So especially when you're drawing a portrait or painting a portrait, getting the eyes accurate is very, very important, because if you can't get the eyes accurate, then that person is not going to look like that person. And it will be very hard to make your portrait or drawing look like the subject that you're hoping to capture. So I found that when I was back learning, if I had known this technique for teaching myself some drawing skills with the eyes, I probably would have maybe moved forward a little bit quicker. And it's really helpful to practice drawing a variety of different eyes so you can get comfortable. In addition to the Lightbox, what I'm going to be using is very simple. You can have just a regular sketch pencil. I do like to have a mechanical pencil because it has a really precise tip and it makes it easy for tracing over certain areas. I also have a variety of erasers. I have a soft art eraser, a gum eraser, and then I also have this eraser pencil type thing. So they're just different ways to erase lines if you need to. Other helpful things to have: a blending stick. It's just a wrapped piece of paper made into like a pencil shape, and you use it to kind of soften edges. And then also you might want to have a pencil sharpener. And I've said before in my other videos that I like using this sketch pad, Kohinoor, and it's a heavy sketch, 9x12. And the reason I like this one is because it has the binding where you can remove the page, and then when you're done you can put the page back in, so then you're not ruining your paper by having it just floating around and getting edges bent and all that kind of thing. So, but any type of sketch paper will do. You don't have to have this. You could even use like printer paper or anything you want. The other thing I would suggest you do is go ahead and look for some photographs of, for this video specifically, eyes, but whatever it is you're wanting to practice. So I found some different types of eyes. Obviously young child eyes, older person eyes, eyes where the face is slightly turned, you know, just whatever type of eyes you'd like to practice doing. And you can print them out in black and white. It doesn't have to be color, because all you really want is the lines, the shadows, and the light areas. You don't need color necessarily. I got my photos off, there's Stella, unsplash.com, and I will leave that link down below to go to that website. They have photographs that you can use for your projects, and you can attribute to the photographer, but it's also free to use. It's a really handy way to get reference photos to use for your art or for just practicing drawing faces. Make sure you get eyes that show different angles if you want to practice, you know, doing faces that are not straight on, that are turned completely to the side or 3/4 turn, because you know, sometimes when you do drawings or portraits of people, the face isn't always, you know, straight on. But if you take some photographs or find some photographs of things that you want to practice and then use your Lightbox to do the practicing, then you'll find over time that you become more confident with knowing how certain things are supposed to look in your drawings or paintings, and that can really help you improve your art and become a better artist. Like I said, if that's something that you want to follow along with, I'm going to switch from this camera and I'm going to go to my like overhead camera, which I'm going to be putting over the Lightbox, and then I'm going to go through several of these photographs with the different eyes, and I'm only going to be focusing on eyes for this time. So if you want to do the same thing, get your photographs in your Lightbox, and I'll be talking while I do the drawings so I can give you some tips and tricks on what you might be able to do, some things you might run into, some things to think about, that sort of thing. So let's get started. I'm gonna start out with this photograph of a baby. So we're gonna be doing a set of baby or child eyes if you wanna follow along and you have a photograph that you wanna use. It's helpful to know how to draw people's eyes at different stages of their lives, because eyes tend to look a little different if you're a baby as opposed to if you're an older person. So what I normally do to start is I'll take my photograph and I'll put it on my Lightbox, and I'll take my sketch paper and I will put it over the top, but I will tape my photograph down and I will tape my sketch paper down as well. That way, if I happen to like lift up my sketch paper to look underneath at a certain point, then I will not accidentally move my photograph and make my drawing off if I don't notice that I've moved it. There's nothing worse than getting like halfway through a tracing and realize that you've shifted the photograph somehow and didn't realize it, and so the whole thing's off. So yeah, just taping it down with some masking tape or regular tape will save your butt, so you're welcome. I'm going to use my mechanical pencil, and so you're really just going to go in and outline the lines that you see. One thing to remember is it's important when you're outlining to not do the kid thing of like just this hard, heavy outline. Different areas of the eyes have different darknesses and light areas. So you want to apply pressure in the darker areas, like the top of the eye where the lid meets the eye is a little bit darker. The crease where the eyelid goes up right there is darker. But an area like, for example, in this photo, the lower lid where it covers the lower part of the baby's iris, that is actually quite a light line, so you wouldn't want to just jam your pencil in and make a dark line there, because number one, that would throw the drawing off, and also when you go to erase that to make it a lighter line, it will not erase as well. So think about how dark you're making your lines in your areas as you're drawing. That'll help out a lot with how it looks to start with. Another thing that people tend to do when they're doing eyes is they have a hard time dealing with eyelashes. Eyelashes are definitely not just straight lines out from the eye or the lid. Eyelashes are usually in little clumps or wisps, and they're usually very soft, not, thick, heavy lines most of the time. So when you do your eyelashes, you want to do it darker at the base and then lighter as they come out to mimic what a real eyelash would kind of be like. And that'll help them be more realistic, and kind of group them together in little areas, because that's how real eyelashes tend to be realistically. And then this baby doesn't really have much of an eyebrow, but they do have an eyebrow, and that helps also define the eyes, because where the eyebrow is placed, and you'll see that in one of the later drawings that we look at, where the eyebrow is placed really helps to make that look like that person's eyes and face. So you just want to do like a light line, set of lines to make the eyebrows. So here's what our eyes look like so far. All of the areas of the eye have been kind of traced, outlined, and you can see there are some darker areas and some lighter areas. The pupil is always going to be dark because pupils are black, so you want to make that the darkest part. The fold above the eye, depending on how deep that fold is going to be one of the darker areas. One thing to remember about the white parts of most people's eyes is that very rarely are the whites of the eyes actually all white. If you're painting the whites of the eyes, there's always another color in there, like a pinkish tone to the inner part of the eye, or like a bluish or a darker purple or maybe burnt umber tone, because the whites of the eyes always have shadows from either the top lid or the bottom lid or where the light's coming from cast on it. So that'll help, if you look at the whites of the eye and you see a little darker area, you definitely want to put that in there, because it'll help make it look more realistic, and it'll help the eye look rounded, because the eyeball itself is disappearing into the skin at the inner and outer parts of the eye, and that'll help show that. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking my blending stick and I am kind of softening the lines, and this also helps to make the lighter and darker parts of the eye I kind of lost my little white highlight spot of my eye, so I'm taking my gum eraser to see if I can kind of bring that back a little bit. If you do that, don't worry. You can try to erase it and see if you can bring that white little spot back. Also, if you have like a white gel pen or a white colored pencil, something like that, you could always just add a touch of white to where the highlight of the eye would be. That way that brings that back in. The highlight is also important because it shows where the light reflects the most in the eye, and it just really helps to make the eye kind of sparkle a little bit. So I tried to bring it back, didn't really do a great job. I'm using my eraser pencil now to try to see if I can lighten it some. If you mess up, if you make a mistake, if you need to erase something, that's, you know, not a big deal at all, because number one, this is practice, and number two, that's my dog snoring in the background, sorry about that, and number two, you've got to do, you know, this over and over again to understand how everything is supposed to look. And making mistakes is how we definitely learn, you know, what to do and what not to do. So I did use a white gel pen, and I put a little dot of white on the eye, which brought back the white spot. You can use your blending tool to go over any line that seems a little harsh to kind of soften it, to add a little bit of shading. So that way it makes those areas look less pencily and more realistic. And that's all I'm doing right now, is I'm just going over my lines and just softening everything and giving some shadows to the areas that need shadow, because shadows help define everything, and so do light areas. Some helpful tips to remember after this drawing: the pupil, the black dot, determines where your subject is looking, so if it looks wrong, move the pupil. The lid usually covers the top of the iris unless you want your subject to look surprised, and right below the lid will be a little darker because it casts a shadow. For the next picture, I picked out some 3/4 turned eyes, which means the head is slightly turned so that one eye appears closer and the other appears further away. And so when you draw your eyes, you're not going to draw them the same size, because that would make the proportions look wrong. So I'm going to tape down the same paper I used for the other set of eyes, because this is just practice. I'm going to tape down my photograph. And then we're going to go ahead, and if you want to do a photograph of a 3/4 turn face as well. So the eye that's closest to you is going to look more like the eye that we did on the baby's face. It's going to look more normal. But the eye that's further away has the nose kind of blocking part of it. And so that's going to make the eye appear like it's shorter, even though we know in reality the eye isn't actually shorter. It's just how it looks because of how the head is turned. So just like we did before, you define the shape of the eye by going over the lid, the upper lid, the lower area where she has kind of a darker area under her eye, the iris and the pupil. Now her iris and pupil in the photo are almost the same color, so her eye appears, you know, very dark in color. And we're just basically doing the exact same thing we did before. Now when we move to the other eye, we're going to do the same exact thing, but as you can see, like if you were drawing this eye freehand and you were drawing a face that was turned, you would want to make sure that you see how short that eye appears as compared to the eye in the front, because that's going to help you get a more accurate looking face rather than trying to make the eyes the same size. We all know they're the same size, they just don't appear that way. A lot of times when you have a 3/4 turn face or a profile face and you can see one of the eyes or part of the eye against the background, the eyelashes are going to be really defined on one eye because they're just kind of out there in space so you can see them. And then, so here's where we're at right now with the two eyes in the correct shape. with nothing done to him yet. I'm going to go ahead and add the eyebrows. That further eyebrow appears shorter again because it's on part of the face that you can't see, and then the eyebrow that's closer to us appears like normal, like you were looking straight on at her. And again, the eyebrow is just short strokes because it's short little hairs. And feel free to, you know, practice different strokes when you're outlining anything that you're practicing with a Lightbox, because making different marks and strokes helps define everything the way you want it to look. I did make a little bit of the nose because that helps show how the face is turned, so it's going to make the eyes make more sense. The inner part of her eye is a little bit covered by the nose, so you're not going to see as much of that as you would with a face that's looking full on at you. And then, like before, I just go in with my blending tool. I'm going to define a little bit of shadow there where the nose covers that other eye. Soften the lid area just a little bit, add in some shadows. Now on these blending sticks, they're going to have some leftover pencil on them, so you can actually use them to add a little bit of shadow where you haven't even put pencil, which is kind of neat. So that's the one eye with a little bit of shading, the eye that appears shorter. And then here's the other eye where it appears like we've seen regular straight facing eyes. So I'm just going to go over with that blending tool, add in more shadow. I mean, you can play around with this part as much as you want to. I'm doing it a little bit quickly because I wanted to do several different eye shapes and types. So I'm just kind of going to speed through a little bit just to give you the idea of what you can do when you practice. But, you know, you can do as much or as little of the shading as you want to. If you want to just do outlines just to get a feel for the different shapes, that's totally fine too. And now let's go over a few helpful tips for eyes that are 3/4 turned. For a turned face, one eye appears bigger than the other. The inner part of the furthest eye may be hidden by the nose, and one eye may look higher or lower depending on how the head is positioned. So here we have the two sets of eyes that we've done so far. The ones that are looking kind of up and away, the baby eyes, and the ones that are turned slightly so that one eye looks bigger than the other. Our next photo will be this man's eyes facing forward. And what's interesting about this person's eyes and why I kind of picked this to do is because in this example, the space between his actual eye and his eyebrow is incredibly important to make him look like him. Because as you can see, he has almost no space between his eyelid and his eyebrow. And so that's really going to be important for whatever face you draw, that you look at the features of their face and try to determine, you know, on this particular person's face, do they have a big lid space? Do they have a small lid space? Are their eyes wide set? Are they close together? All of that is going to help you make the person look more like that person, which is, you know, when you're doing a portrait or a drawing of somebody specific, that's what you're wanting. You're wanting somebody to take a look at that drawing or painting and say, oh, that's whoever it is. Not, oh, that looks good. That's not what we're going for. We want to make them look as close to the subject of your drawing as possible. So again, more practice of tracing the upper lid, doing the lower lid, remembering the dark and light areas. He's got a little bit of a crease and a shadow under his eye. His eye fold up above his eye and his eyelid are a little bit darker, so you'd make those darker. So there's the eye basically. Just the eye by itself, nothing else. So obviously it doesn't look like this person's eye, but we're only getting started. So then you would go ahead and do your short strokes for the eyebrows. Men generally have a little bit heavier eyebrows, so it's okay to go a little darker on those. And then there's that really narrow space between the lid and the eyebrow. That's really specific to this person. So there's his one eye with the eyebrow and the eye pretty much completely outlined. Now he has the shadow here on the other side of his nose. So if you were actually using this photograph as your reference for a painting or for a drawing, the shadowy side of his face is very important to show where the light's coming from. Obviously the light is hitting his face on one side and leaving the other side in a lot more shadow. So even when you're drawing with pencil, you still want to include that information if you're wanting to accurately make this person look like the photograph, or if you're wanting to capture them in this particular, setting that they were in. So this eye over here is going to be darker than the other eye. So it's okay on a darker side of the face where there's more shadow to make your lines a little bit darker. You can press down a little harder with your pencil. You might want to shade in the shadowy areas so that those are included in the drawing. Again, we're doing short hair-like strokes for doing the eyebrows, a little bit heavier because he's a guy. And then you have the iris and the pupil like we've done in the other eyes. He's looking pretty much straight at us, so you can see that his eyes are fairly symmetrical. One eye seems to be maybe a touch smaller than the other, but they're pretty similar. What's going to define the difference here is the darkness on one side of the face contrasting with the light hitting the other side of the face. So then we take the blending tool and we go ahead and blend. I'm using some leftover pencil on the end of it to create that shadow that's on the side of the nose. So you don't even have to use a pencil to do that. You could use your blending tool instead. And on this side of his face that I'm working on right now, I'm pretty much going to make sure everything is shaded to show that it's shadowy compared to the other side. Some helpful tips that this drawing taught us about eyes are the distance between the lid and the eyebrow matters. One eye may have more shadows because of where the light source is. And also the white reflections in the eyes can be two different shapes and they don't have to be round. For this photograph, the eye on our right has a round highlight and the other eye's highlight is almost like a rectangle. So look for that too when you're drawing. Here's a photo where the face is completely in profile or side view. So the person's face is completely turned, and in many times where the face is in profile, you won't even see one eye. It'll be completely hidden by the nose and the way the face is turned. So a lot of times with a photo like this one, you're going to be doing the profile shape, the forehead, the nose, the lips, and then the eye itself is going to be completely different than the other views that we've looked at, even the 3/4 turn view. So right now I am just taping down my sketch paper, the one we used earlier, and then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go in and you're going to trace the eye, but you can see the eye is more triangular when you have a profile view of the eye. So you are seeing it from a very different angle than if you're looking straight on. So it's triangular or even cone shaped. The lower lid, because she's looking up, is very prominent. There's shadows to show where the kind of fold is that goes around the eye, and then the part underneath her iris and pupil is very light colored. Eyelashes, especially on a woman, are going to be very defined for this view, especially because she's looking up. You only have one eyebrow to worry about. And then, like I said, that other eye, you can see like just a small touch of the other side of her nose, but really it's just a line almost. So for a side view eye, it's almost like you have the two sides of like a triangle, and in the middle of those is just a curved shape, which is why I said it's kind of like a cone shape rather than the almond of an eye when you're looking at it straight. I'm using my blending tool here again. You would want to blend in the shadowy areas to help define where the folds are, where the side of the nose is, where the lid is. And then I just added in a little bit of shadow. I'm taking my mechanical pencil where I do a little bit sharper, more defined pencil marks, and I'm darkening in the front part of the actual eyeball itself, the eyelashes, to help show the eye is open and looking up. So some parts of your drawings can be like really almost pencil-y, where you have like the defined pencil lines, and then other parts can be the soft look of using the blending tool. It's really just your preference and how you think it looks best to define what you're working on. And some helpful tips for drawing a side view eye. The furthest eye might not be visible at all on the face and profile, and the eye will look more cone-shaped from this angle. This next one I thought was really interesting because this is a person who has two very different eye shapes. Same person, two different eye shapes. And that is because even though we tend to think that they're that way, people's faces aren't actually symmetrical in the way we think they are. Like they have an eye on each side and the nose is lined up pretty well, but a lot of times people's faces, one side is slightly different than the other. And in this one, it's really noticeable because one eye is a lot bigger and rounder, and then the other eye is much more almond shaped, like some of the other eyes that we've looked at. So this person's eye shapes are two different and distinct shapes. So again, just going in and tracing over the eye shape, putting in the eyebrows, pushing down a little bit more with the pencil because he's a man and his eyebrows do tend to be a little bit darker with heavier hairs, eyebrow hairs. Now here's the second eye where the corner is much more elongated than in the other eye. So just making sure that you're following the actual shape that's there and not trying to match it to his other eye, because then that would make him look less like him, because obviously if you know this person, you know his face looks a certain way, and you want to represent it the best you can to look like he does in real life. So here I've turned off the Lightbox and I'm just checking the drawing that I've done so far, getting my blender, and I'm going to make some softened lines, add a little bit of shadow. And as you can see, with doing several different sets of eyes in, quick succession, once you start practicing it, it gets easier each time you do it to basically get through the beginning of it quickly. Like, you're like, okay, well, I just go in, I trace the outline, I get the pupil and the iris in there. After I'm done with my drawing, I go in with my blending tool if you choose to do that. And voila, his eyes are actually fairly simple to do, very straightforward. Just adding in a little bit of shadow to help define the face structure. So some helpful tips here. Faces aren't symmetrical. Eyes can be different shapes or sizes. And don't worry about matching the eyes to each other. Just worry about making the eyes look like that person. Okay, so final photo. And you may look at this one and go, oh my God, how do you make this? This is an older person's face. And in an older person's face, depending on, what their skin looks like, the skin really defines the eyes, because the wrinkles and folds around the eye help make the shape of that eye look like it does on that person. So you really do have to pay attention to the darks and lights, where the wrinkles are placed, and how much of that covers the actual eyeball itself. So again, you would go in the same way you do with the other ones, tracing the shape of the eye itself, adding in the pupil and the iris. She has some highlights right at the top part of her eye at her lid. And as you can see in this particular photo, this woman, not a lot of her eyes show. A lot of her skin has kind of folded down to cover her eye. And so it's really important to put those skin folds in your drawing or painting to help show what her face looks like. And in this eye over on this side, you barely see any of her actual eye at all, just a very thin slit, at least in this photo. So for this demonstration part of this, I'm going to go ahead and do the eyes and then kind of sketch in some of the wrinkles and do some blending. You can go crazy with this type of a drawing, really getting precise with your wrinkles, your darks and lights, where you blend, where you put the white top parts of the wrinkles so that it looks like they're almost 3D. You may notice that she has very little eyebrow, so that's a spot that is not really going to be as defined on her as on some of our other subjects that I did, because she really doesn't have that much in the way of eyebrows. So here's where I'm going to go in, and I'm just going to sketch in where I can see some of the most defined wrinkles on her face. Then there's some darker areas where there's a lot of shadow. So you definitely want to include that if that's in the photo you're looking at. She's got wrinkles underneath her eyes, so that helps shape her eye as well. And so a wrinkle or a fold is basically going to be just a dark area, which is the part that's recessed, and then a lighter area, which is the part that's out in the open that shows, and it's just a series of darks and lights. And so if you really pay attention to where the deepest part of the fold is going to be darker, And where the highest part of the fold is going to be white or a really light skin color. Or if you're just doing a pencil drawing, it'll be one of the lightest areas. Then that'll help you make those wrinkles look more real. So here's what the areas around her eyes look like. There's where the wrinkles are placed. And then we take our handy dandy blender and we make that shadowy area more soft. And then you can take that blender and you can go over all of your wrinkle areas. To make them look more like wrinkles and less like just straight pencil marks. So you're just starting to like define where the wrinkles are. And like I said, you can go nuts with this and get very, very specific and make it look incredibly realistic. You can give the impression of wrinkles. That's really up to you and your style and how you prefer to have your drawings look. She's going to have really dark whites of her eyes because the lid covers most of her whites. So there's going to be a lot of shadow cast there. So it's really not going to be much of a white to her eye. It's going to be a very shadowy area because the light isn't really hitting that like it would be on a person's eye who doesn't have all of the eyelid and the underneath eyelid casting all that shadow onto her eye. So basically for the wrinkles, all you're doing is blending, adding in darker parts where the wrinkles are deep. You can use your gum eraser or an eraser to erase away the top parts of the wrinkles to make them lighter so they look more 3D. I left that highlight in her eye right at the top there, and I'm just going in with my pencil again to make the inner part of the wrinkles a little bit darker. So you can see that makes it look a lot less flat and a lot more defined. And you can do that several times. Use your blender, go in with your pencil, use your blender again, just going back and forth, use your eraser. And then you may notice that I am not doing just like a straight hard line. I'm kind of sketchy with my pencil. So I'm kind of going back and forth in like a little tiny sawing motion to give a little bit more feathery or pencil-y line, and that also helps to make it a little bit more realistic, a little bit more stylized maybe. Now I'm just going in with my blending tool again and working on the other eye. Just softening lines, adding shadows, darkness to different areas, the deepest parts of the wrinkles, all the stuff that we did on the other eye, you would just go ahead and do on this eye, just remembering that, like I said, faces aren't symmetrical, so they're not going to be exactly the same. Once you get more comfortable using the Lightbox, you can go back and forth between turning the Lightbox off and having the light on. That way you can see either the photograph more clearly or you can see your drawing more clearly depending on which one is on or off. And I find that for me, it's easiest to kind of switch back and forth a little bit just so I can see where I'm at, what I've done. And then when I turn the Lightbox back on, I can see where I need to fix things, make something darker, make something lighter, all of that stuff. And just like I did with the other side, I go back in with my pencil. I add in some darker areas like the pupil, the darkest part of the wrinkles, underneath the lid, where the shadow would be. All of those areas you can go in with a pencil to make it darker, and then if you want to go back with your blender and make it softer, you can. So you can keep going back and forth and filling in the wrinkles, making the darks and lights. Just keep going until you're happy with how it looks. And that's pretty much what you have to do to make those eyes look correct in the face. Is basically the whole secret to the older person eyes is the wrinkles. So helpful tips from working on this set of eyes of an older person would be: older eye shape is determined by the way the skin folds and wrinkles around the eyes. Darks and lights define the folds and wrinkles, and eyebrows may be sparse and less defined than on a younger person. Here are all the eyes from today's video, and if you look at them all together, you can see every one of them is quite different from the other. Obviously, we know they're all eyes in human faces. You can also do this exercise with like animal eyes, hooves, paws, that kind of thing. Like I said, you can kind of do this with anything that you want to learn how to draw or are struggling with. But as you can see, when you put all of them together, what makes people really unique when you look at their face is their eyes. So getting the eyes correct is one of the best ways. Here's some other examples of times when I've done this. I was playing around here with like different ways of making my pencil marks, and then here I did some more like educational examples of like at the top how people might draw an eye when they're like a kid or when they don't really know how to draw, and then the difference between that and drawing real sets of eyes. If you want to see these more closely, I do have a blog post where I kind of go through this eye hacks exercise in written form, and I include photos of these eyes that I did there. So I will leave a link to that blog post below if you want to go check it out. It's on my Jaime Leigh Writes blog. Here's another bunch that I did. Again, at the top is the way an eye might be drawn by somebody who doesn't really know how to draw, and then underneath a set of eyes from a real photograph of a person, and what you have to think about in order to draw that particular set of eyes. And again, the one below is the same type of thing. And you can see the difference in lashes on that last one. So that is the end of today's video. Please like and subscribe, ring the bell, and I will see you next time. I hope you have a great day. Bye! And in today's video, we are going to be doing an art, what did I say outside? In today's video will be an art video. Why can't I think of what to say? So it's a really handy way to get not accurate. It's a really handy way to get, there we go. Hi Stella.